morning. Good morning. Winter is here. Yesterday I said it as well, but today it's really here. And I hear tomorrow it will definitely be here. So looking forward to that. Good morning. Good morning. Very nice to have you all with us this morning. Looking forward to continue my conversation with Rob and Pritchard about data and the importance of that to build a solid foundation for a financial planning business. In fact, for any business, but obviously we focus a lot on financial planning. So really looking forward to getting into this again with them today. Some interesting things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, trusts, and we're going to talk about goals and objectives and financial assets like retirement funds and policies and that kind of stuff, and the things that's really a challenge as far as that is concerned. And we'll end off the series then today with that. So yeah, looking forward to getting to that. And it's something that's really near and dear to, well, almost core to what it is that I do as well. So I love having these conversations, and I want to thank them in advance, for being on the show. This is the third episode in the series, and I think it's been good. It set the tone for a lot of things to come possibly in the future. So really looking forward to seeing where we take this, for the show as a whole, but also for these discussions around what is really important and things that we need to consider, and how does this fit into the bigger scheme of things? I think that is really where it's at, and yesterday we were talking about the new world and where things may be going and what's probably going to be the situation. And so we don't really know. We'll see, but we need to consider all these things and really, really think about that. Roddy, good morning. First this morning, I don't know if you were really first, but you're definitely the first to say hi, and I always appreciate it. Thank you very much, Kobus Klein. Good morning. Denise is here. Raymond, good morning. We've got Almin and Malcolm. Everybody's here. Casper, and then Melanie. Melanie's also from Iress. Good morning, Melanie. Nice to see you. Tinas and Chris Roo. Good morning, Chris. Thanks for all the sort of back and forth conversation yesterday. I miss you, my friend. Chris is a big mentor of mine, and he's just awesome. Let me not get into that. That's going to be a show on its own. So, Johan Forster, good morning. Johan, I haven't replied yet to that last message, and I appreciate it. I'm going to be in contact today. Sorry, it's just been like hectic yesterday, and so a lot better. Salome, I had a chat to you yesterday. It was so awesome. Bye, dankie, ek waardeer het. Then Grant, good morning. Hazel, welcome back. Nico Ackerman, goeiemorgen, Nico. Welcome back, Kevin. Nice to have you here. Dirk Groeneveld, Peter Lopez, once again, thank you very much, guys, for all being here. I really appreciate it. And I know I say that a lot, but I don't know how else to convey my gratitude. It's like, I don't know, sometimes you feel like you say things over and over and over again, and that it doesn't really, bring along sort of, I think, exactly what I'm trying to say and what I feel. But it's really amazing just to have you all here with us this morning and every morning. And whether you're watching the recording, if you're doing that, thank you very much for that as well. So, remember to subscribe and connect with me, please. I think we're on 424 subscribers at the moment as we're making this or as we're doing this episode this morning. Please remember to give us some love and like and share and all that good stuff so that everybody knows about it. And please interact with one another. This one is almost the most important thing to me, that you can interact with us, but also interact with one another in the chats and, build those relationships. You never know what happens in the future and where things may lead, and maybe it was one day because you had the courage just to say hi. And I don't know, a year or 5 down the line, it has a significant impact on the direction of your life and your business. Who knows? So, some announcements just quickly, actually just one announcement and one reminder. So I'll first do the reminder. Remember that tomorrow we have, let me just switch that off, sorry. We have Brian Parsley with us live tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. South African time. Really looking forward to getting into the conversation with Brian. And, it's all going to be all around strategic conversations, and we're going to bring sales into it. And all sorts of stuff that is really, really relevant. Now, if you were here or if you watched Sandro Forte's episode, I think this may be in the same sort of vein with a little bit of a different angle, because we're going to be talking about conversations and communication. Most of that, which I think is absolutely critical. And conversations is not only about talking like I am now. It's really about listening and really understanding and hearing what you should be hearing. So really excited to get into it with Brian. And thank you, Kobus, for putting me in touch with Brian. I appreciate that. And then I can announce, yes, happy. Another one is coming up. It's the estate planning refresher finally. Everything's been set up and arranged and all of it. So the 9th of June, it's Tuesday. It's in 2.5 weeks, well, 2 weeks time, 3 weeks time, 2 weeks time, I think. 3 weeks, I'm not sure, about 2 weeks. And we'll be having the estate planning refresher. Again, it's a live session. It'll be from 9 until 12. And we'll again have about half an hour's worth of breaks. So it's about 2.5 hours worth of content. We are applying for the CPD once again. So it will be CPD approved. And we're going to focus on the most important things as far as estate planning is concerned to really, refresh that memory and do that. So we'll use examples and things. So we'll talk about the technical aspects, but also all the other things. So we'll touch on things like marital regimes and interstate succession, and we'll talk about certain deductions, and we're going to talk about apportionment of estate duty, because that's something that a lot of people are missing in the planning, particularly where there's certain situations around buy and sells and, or other people owning policies, etc. There's sometimes things that we miss there. So we're going to be talking about that, and then some tools and strategies. How can we do some tax efficient estate planning in the process? So all of that in 3 hours. It's packed with value. It's still $350. If you're a profile me client, it'll be $315, $315. And if you're an Ignite member, it'll be 300 Rand to attend. So if you want to go and book, bookings are open. It opened last night at 12. Not because I scheduled it like that, but because that's when I finished setting this up. So francois.co.za/online refresher. That's francois.co.za online refresher. It'll take you directly to the page. All the information you want, what we're going to cover, all of that will be there. Exactly what's going to happen, what you can expect, the outcomes and all of it. And then also the booking form where you can book to attend with me. So I hope to see you there. And really looking forward to spending some more quality time with you and bring you loads of value. All right. So on that note, lekker. I'm getting excited. It feels like I'm going to go on stage now and have a sing, but I can't sing. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to talk to Rob and Richard, and they're going to have to listen to me in their ears. So good morning, guys. Thank you very much for joining me once again. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Morning, Francois.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
It's nice.
Just so you know, we can't sing either.
Fantastic. We sing technology, so let's agree on that. Welcome. I just wanted to sort of quickly, before we get into it, just very quickly maybe summarize what we spoke about, or just maybe review what we spoke about last week. So last week we were getting all into assets and liabilities specifically. So we really went into a lot of detail. We spoke about investment assets and fixed assets and lifestyle assets and all the different types of assets and, things that we need to consider from a tax point of view and so forth. And we then ended off with talking about income and expenses. So some of the things that I want to get into is going to lead back to that. And as I said, I really look forward to having this conversation. So I want to start off, Rob, with let me just get all over the clicky thing here. There we go. So I want to start off with financial assets. I've termed it financial assets, but it's basically talking about retirement funds and policies and unit trusts and those kind of things, because often, and I've seen this, it's interesting how different providers actually deal with this differently. I try and deal with these things from a what makes sense to me point of view instead of what the system does and where the system goes with this. If you think about, some systems will view a unit trust as an asset, just a normal plain asset, or it may be seen as an investment asset. But other systems will put it under policies, actually, like an investment policy, and it's still a unit trust. It's still treated correctly, but it's sort of classified differently, or it's categorized differently. And I think it's important to have that view when we look at what we're working with, what will be, what makes sense because when I discuss this with the client, it's got to show up in the right place and it's got to make sense from that point. So I just wanted to lead in with that and sort of, let's start off with retirement funds, Rob. That is a very interesting sort of area to talk about and a lot of moving parts sometimes, and to get the information is a real challenge.
Absolutely, Francois. Certainly one of the things that we look at from from an Iress perspective is trying to keep the grouping of financial assets in terms of what makes sense, i.e., is it a normal policy? Is it an annuity? Is it a retirement fund? Or if it doesn't fall into any of those categories, then invariably it falls under an investment asset. So we try to look at what the tax nature of the underlying vehicle is, and that to define how it gets grouped. I mean, there's a lot of debate, obviously, in terms of where one should be putting something. Is it an endowment, or is it an endowment on a list platform? If it's on a list platform, is it an investment, or is it still a policy? I think the bottom line is that you've just got to be looking at doing something that is consistent in terms of the way that you segment and categorize your financial assets. Retirement funds is actually getting quite interesting. We're seeing Astute moving into this space now with Momentum on board with their list platform wrapper pension and provident funds. I think they're shortly being followed by Sanlam, and obviously the rest of the market will follow suit in providing funds that are sitting on, retirement funds that are sitting on platforms such as LISPs and being available to download, which I think is a big help to advisors. There's certainly a lot of complexity, as we know, in retirement funds. We have so many nuances in terms of the way that these schemes are put together. 4 times salary as group life, or 2 times, or what is it for disability? Is there a disability pension as well? Is there a death pension for the spouse? Is there cover for the spouse? All of these things are not the easiest thing in the world to make sense of, and again can be fairly difficult to find. So I think the fact that Astute has entered this market is a good thing in terms of pushing that data through, and certainly from our perspective, we are busy engaging an awful lot with Astute to ensure that information flows through into our software, and I'm pretty sure that the other providers out there, such as At Work, Elite Wealth, Profida, and so forth, will also be doing something similar. Some of the big issues on group schemes, obviously, is the approved or unapproved group life cover as well. These things don't generally jump off statements and hit you in the face and say, "This is approved group life. I'm taxable." So there certainly is quite a bit of homework to do again around this, and finding that information is certainly challenging. We have advisor feedback coming into us that says, they're just battling to get on top of that. So again, kudos to Astute, but it's obviously key that we understand that differentiation between approved and unapproved as far as the impact that tax can have. So certainly from our perspective, if you're unsure, make it taxable. What's the worst that can happen? You underprovide. The provisions are underprovided to a degree, and you possibly, if you were looking at risk planning, you might end up selling the client a little bit more life cover than they actually need. And certainly, I think that when one is unsure, it is best to go in on the conservative and rather sell the client a little bit too much cover, or let the client save a little bit more than they should do. I don't think anyone's going to sue you for having too much money at retirement, for example.
I agree. I've definitely, I always say, nobody has ever been unhappy about having too much money, but just come 5 rand short, then you see all hell can break loose. So I agree with you. And I don't know, but let me make a statement. So shouldn't we just then not care and just make everything taxable and then just go worst case scenario? I don't know why is it important to have these things correct? I think there's two schools of thought here. The one is like me and you definitely feel like it's got to be right for that particular situation. Other people feel like, nah, just need to be in the ballpark, so let's just make it all taxable and not even worry about it. I don't know. Do you have a view on that?
Well, absolutely. I think that where we're sitting today is, excuse me, certainly if you're looking at some of these schemes that are offering four, 5, or 6 times your pensionable salary as group life cover, we certainly are getting up into some very big numbers. And if you're talking somebody who's earning $1 million, $1.5 million a year, which is not uncommon today to find them, you're up at 6 million, 7, 8 million group life. And to tax that, if it's not taxable, and sell the client a shortfall and make that up in life cover in the shortfall, you could quite easily be selling the client 2 or 3 million rand life cover that the client doesn't actually need. Now, not only is that going to cost, because somebody who's earning that kind of salary is probably, approaching 40 or in their 40s already. And most certainly it's going to cost money to get that. So it's the cost side of things. It's the unnecessary side of not doing the right homework and getting the right data. And I agree. As I said, it is a tough one. It does require the right amount of homework. But once you've got that data, the reuse of it is then easy. And I think that's the thing. Again, it's do we have the right data to kick off? Is the foundation correct?
And Rob, that's sort of, I think the whole point of the series is that there's a lot of work in the beginning, but once you've got the right data, from there on, it becomes a breeze. It becomes a pleasure. It is like all you want to do. You don't even want to spend time on your hobbies anymore. You just want to work with data because the things are great and they are almost, I won't say perfect, but, it just makes your life so much easier. So it's one of those things that makes me think of Zig Ziglar telling the story of the pump. These old, I didn't grow up on a farm, but I know like these old handheld pumps that you had to pump water back in the old days. I mean, before we had like boreholes and things like that, you would have to pump that pump and to get the water up, and you would like be going mad with that thing and no water is coming out. And if you stop, you don't know where it is, but if you keep on going, once that water starts coming out, it's you're just tapping this thing like with a slow rhythm, and it keeps pumping the water out. And I think it's sort of the same thing with data. Put in the work in the beginning, make sure it's right, and then to maintain and add or take away, it becomes so much easier. Richard, but there's something that you and I have spoken about a number of times. We have had several conversations, not recently, but we have, and that was around the GPF. Because the GPF is one of those retirement funds that, it's like, it looks easy and it's like, but when you start working with those things, it's quite interesting to get it into the system the right way. And there are so many different ways to get it into a system, but what do you think are maybe some of the most important things around that? Or what are the things that you see that users struggle with in terms of the GPF?
Well, I think it talks to the series. A lot of people battle to get the data for that, because a lot of these funds are old. They've been around for 30, 40 years, some of them. And some of their members have been involved in those funds for just as long. So it's finding that data. And then obviously you've got the 1998 legislation change, which brings in another level of complication to that. The funds, the lump sum changes. And then you've got a lot of people, and I think the members themselves don't understand how the gratuity and the annuity are actually calculated. What bonuses, what's the supplementary benefits, all that data has, as we've discussed, has a material impact on those results and what the client gets at the end of the day. So yeah, there is a lot of complexity in that space. We don't find a lot of it coming into the X tools. There are a few life insurance companies who deal with them, who we've worked closely with to try and get those calculations right. And there's a lot of detail that people aren't aware of in terms of how the life insurance companies set their own rates depending on they use the members and that sort of thing. So some will have an annuity rate that's different to others, and it's not easy to find those. Bits of data, and we've actually gone as far as bringing in an option for them to just overwrite that stuff, instead of, because it's so difficult to get that information. So the guys are actually given the ability to just put in a value that they've come up with, or they can literally look at the statement and put in the value, whether it's a lump sum or a gratuity. So yeah, it's an interesting space, and it's like I said, we don't see a lot of it, but it's definitely, there are the people out there using it.
And just want to add to that, I think that I remember years ago, and in fact, I think they still do. I think Sanlam still actually has built their own GEPF calculator to allow for all these nuances between the schemes, because they're not standard. They've all got different bits and pieces. If you take early retirement from a scheme, what are the penalties? Because it's a defined benefit scheme, what are the penalties and clauses? So
it's your buyback in that as well.
Yeah, it's so key to get to the bottom of that data, because once we've got it, the calculations are, once you've got the right basis of the calculation, it's easy to produce the right calculation. But it's just all those differences. I think fortunately, DB schemes are slowly but surely disappearing off the map. They were complicated, and the rules and around them and define contributions so much easier in terms of handling it. But again, even in the DC funds, we still, as we said earlier, have that problem in collating the information, understanding the tax implications of lump sum payouts and from a death and disability perspective and so forth. So, yeah.
Yeah, because maybe that's a conversation between, as you say, defined contribution and defined benefit. But even in the defined benefit space, I mean, there are so many differences. It's not like, there's one way of putting information into a system. And also the way that those statements look, I mean, and we've now discussed this, so I don't want to belabor the point, but there's really a lot to consider there, and you really need to know and understand the fund. And one thing that I see from what I do from my point of view is that when it comes to these GEPF funds or these like government funds where there was pre-98, that was tax-free and then it became taxable after that and all of it, most advisors, I'm making a very blanket statement, but in my experience, most advisors don't get that correct. So when they look at that split of before 98 and post 98 to determine what the tax-free portion is, the one thing that everybody's missing is that it is not only, it's not like, let's say there's 10 million in the fund and now you do the calculation and then you can take that entire part as a tax-free lump sum and then add your 500,000 to that. It is always a portion of whatever you're taking as a lump sum gets split between pre-98 and post that, and then you can also get an additional up to 500,000 if you haven't taken previous things. So I think there's a lot of knowledge that is required that needs to overlay all of this. No system is going to be able to guide you in correctly just entering the information. It can do entering the information, it can guide you to do that, but not to do it correctly necessarily. So again, and when we started off in the first episode, I think one of the things that I mentioned was that knowledge is so critical if you really want to get the most out of whatever system it is that you are using, and also to do the best job for the client at the end of the day. Okay, so let's move on from retirement funds, because if I keep on going, we will be retiring before we get to the next part. So policies, insurance policies, and again, a policy is a policy. It's easy, but how we use it for different purposes, and there's different structures and all that kind of stuff. So again, this can very quickly become a minefield if you start incorporating buy and sell policies that may not be exempt, or you incorporate key man policies that may not be exempt, or other people are owning the policies that's not you or your spouse, and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about policies, Rob. So
absolutely, Francois. Again, we're in a similar situation with policies, certainly as far as third-party owned policies is concerned, that may have a purpose of a key man, contingent, buy and sell, etc. When you get the astute feed, there's nothing in the astute feed that says that this policy has been structured correctly in terms of who the owner should be, who the life assured should be. So you don't know at face value whether that policy may be subject to a state duty, may form part of an accrual, and so on. So again, there is some homework to do, and really what you almost need to be thinking is that if certainly as far as third-party owned policies that are unrelated to the family. So it's some arbitrary person that it's not the wife or a child or something, or it's a company or something. Immediately the flag should go up that says, I need to understand if this policy has been structured correctly. Didn't take it out at your own instance as a buy and sell, for example, or did we set it up as a conforming policy to, I think it's 11W, and so forth. So the whole nature of those policies is key. For those of us that have for many years subscribed to Old Mutual Premiums and Problems book, still one of the most practical handbooks I've ever come across in terms of understanding this industry. There was always a table that they produced that had the rules that revolve around policies, who the owner is, who the life assured is, who the beneficiaries are, and then whether that policy is subject to estate duty or as part of the accrual or the joint estate, depending on the marital regime. So one of the things that we certainly have done is we looked at all of those rules, and we've encompassed those rules into the various calculators where relevant, so that based on owner, life assured, and beneficiary, we will then make sure that the policy is either part of an accrual, part of a joint estate, included or excluded from an estate duty perspective. We do give override options as well, because just because you've got a third-party owner doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be estate dutiable. But we give you the ability that if you've done the right homework, you have the ability to override. But again, it can be a bit confusing. And then, of course, ensuring that all that data is coming in correctly, especially on the policies that we have today, where you've got contractual values, contractual owner, possibly the owner is also a life assured. And then you've got other lives assured on the policy as almost what I guess we could term rider benefits in a way. And it's quite possible to have multiple lives assured on a single policy. And to be able to extract that and make sure that we're using the correct values in the correct calculations is quite a lot of work to get it right.
Yep.
Yeah, and Richard, from importing this from Astute, you hear so many people say, oh, Astute is not right, and there's so many mistakes, and it's this and it's that. And then you have product providers where, most of their benefits is included in the notes of the policy because there's just simply, they've got all these bells and whistles and there's absolutely no place to put this stuff, but, is that really an issue, or has Astute become better as far as that is concerned? Does things pull through more correctly these days? Is it still a challenge? And maybe what not precautions, but what steps can people take to ensure that the information is correct? Don't just assume that when it pulled in, it's correct. Like, what can people do to make sure that that's fine?
Look, I think Astute has done a lot of work over the years, and we have less issues coming in and less issues with data, to my knowledge. But I think the important thing for me in this is that insurance policies and the benefits and the contract values and all that go into a policy is vast, and there's a lot of data that you need to be familiar with. And if you're not familiar with it, it's going to look okay, or you're not going to know where to look. And when you're using that data, knowing what that data is about and being able to pinpoint where it's needed starts with the understanding. So if, for example, you've got a policy that needs to be imported into the tools, whatever it might be, into a calculator, and you're only dealing in retirement planning, for example, you've got a client who needs some retirement planning done, there's less data you need to be aware of. So understanding that underlying data that you're getting from Astute or policies, or the policy rules and regulations that go with it, you're going to need less data when it comes to retirement planning, because it's either an investment policy or it's a non-investment policy. And if it's an investment, you want to understand the growth and that sort of thing, just as a normal asset or a financial asset, as you've termed it. Then you've also got the non-risk side of the non-investment side, which is literally just risk and retirement planning. So you want to understand what the premiums are. That's it. it gets more technical when you want to do a risk plan, obviously. And there's a lot of stuff that you need to be aware of. And it might not necessarily be the data that's coming through from Astute that's incorrect or not meeting your standards, or whatever it might be. But
I think,
yeah.
Sorry, Richard, cut you off there. I think what we've got to, what we try to differentiate, and Francois, you opened the conversation with talking about Astute and pushing a lot of detail into things like notes. I think what we've got to bear in mind is, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to produce a policy schedule and understand that the policy's got cover, reinstatement option, and premium growth at 10% and cover growing at 6%, or whatever those values, etc., are? Because those benefits, whilst they're good for conversation in terms of, have we optimized your policy for any eventuality, a lot of those rider benefits as such have no bearing on financial planning. So it's important that we obviously, from our perspective, we cater obviously for the policy schedule with notes and as much notes as you want to put out there, we can produce. But certainly from a planning perspective, it's key that we've got the correct values and that we are utilizing them in the correct way. And as I said, coming back to owner, life assured, beneficiary as the three key inputs in terms of any calculation that we produce.
Yeah,
go Richard, sorry.
Sorry, and also another important part is we haven't touched on is marital regimes. That's huge when it comes to policies and how that estate duty is paid, depending on who the beneficiaries are. And Rob said it, the life assured, and that a COP marriage is vastly different to an ANC with accrual when it comes to a risk plan. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and that's an important part to remember.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it makes such an important point. Is like, understand what is the job that you're trying to get done at this moment. So if it's financial planning, which values are really critical for that? And then, as you said, producing a policy schedule, what would be important for that? Alrighty, so I think that's enough about the financial assets. I want to talk very briefly about trusts, because one of the things that I see in practice as well is that, I don't know if you experience this as well, Rob, where a lot of people are putting trust assets into the personal planning because one, and I think there's a few reasons, and you can maybe allude to some of those, but it's that they want to see the assets and the liabilities and the things in their planning because they see it as part of what they have. How often does this happen where somebody has a trust, there's assets in there, and then people, advisors, users include that into their planning?
Look, how often it happens, I don't actually know in terms of practice, but we certainly do see it quite a lot. And it's things that come out. Richard runs a series of what we term master classes, where we take deep dives into various aspects of planning and discuss apportionment of estate duty and the detail around that. You mentioned that at the opening of the show. But I think where the problem really comes in is certainly around the discretionary trust, where people have set up a discretionary trust. Certainly, if we go back into the 90s, I think that people didn't have a clue why they were setting up trusts. It just was a fashion statement more than anything at that time. But what we're seeing is people saying, well, I've got this discretionary trust. It's myself and my wife and my tame accountant that are trustees. And, for all intents and purposes, they're actually my assets. And so they want to be able to have them reflected in the plan, because ultimately they're a big part of what their future looks like. Of course, that does compromise the plan. There's no way of segmenting them in a calculator from an estate duty perspective or an accrual perspective or anything like that, when in actual fact they've got nothing to do with it. So certainly it's something that has been keeps coming back at us and has done over the years, and we obviously talk about it and comes up in as I said, Richard's masterclasses. But really what we're interested in with the trust is that it needs to be recorded as a separate entity. it is a separate legal entity. It's a taxpayer in its own right. And having it recorded as a separate entity, you obviously want to also then make sure that we never forget about it. Certainly from a planning perspective, I don't see the end client ever forgetting about it, but from a planning perspective, we may, until the client reminds us. So one of the things that you're wanting to make sure is that we have what we call a linked client. In other words, myself and my wife are the key people that we're doing planning for. But there's also a link from my record to the trust, or to an investment company for that matter. And that way I'm able to review the balance sheet of the trust separately. I can report on it separately. I can combine it into a report pack for the clients if I need to. But what are the aspects that we really are interested with any form of trust or investment company? We're interested in the distributions, whether they be of an income or a capital nature. They obviously are treated slightly differently in terms of recurring, single, tax, etc. But those are really the things that we need to focus on. And obviously, as we said in the previous session last week, when we were talking about incomes, if there is an income stream that is being paid from a trust, it's important that we understand the tax nature of that income stream. So we are bringing it into any cash flow in the correct way and taxing accordingly. If one is looking to do more detailed planning for trusts, and again, the purpose of these sessions has not been to talk about calculations and the ins and outs, but just bear in mind that you should be ring fencing those assets and looking at them in their own right. So if you want to bring them into a cash flow model, then do so. But bear in mind that trusts, well, I'm sure I don't have to tell this audience, are complex beasts. We have trusts that are set up for disabled people. We have trusts that are set up for minor children. We have discretionary trusts that are just there because we didn't know what to do with the assets and we want to manage our estates a little bit more efficiently and effectively so as to avoid estate duty in the future. But the tax nature of those trusts becomes complex, especially when we've got disabled beneficiaries or minor children under the age, I can't remember the age, I never remember if it's 21 or 23 or whatever it is, but the trust is taxed as a natural person for a period of time, and then as soon as the youngest beneficiary turns a certain age, it'll switch into the corporate rate of tax. And all of those things have material bearing on your outcomes. We actually do offer tools for planning for trusts and everything, but again, as I said, it's an area that one needs to tread carefully. The complexities of everything that we've spoken about in this series are compounded when we move into the trust situation.
Yep. No, Rich, is there anything you'd like to add about trusts?
No, it's a technical area, Francois, and yeah, I'm not an expert on trusts. So I think what Rob said is enough.
Yeah. Okay. So let's then move on to goals, objectives, and needs. I think different people have got different, definitions, or not definitions, but names for what this is. But this is really outcomes that we're looking for, from a financial perspective, where we can link a specific monetary value to a specific goal that the person wants to achieve, be it a specific lifestyle or be it a trip that they want to do or something they want to purchase or something they want to pay off or whatever that may be, there's sort of, and specifically in X-Plan. So I just want to sort of mention this, that because I think, often we would just refer to needs basically, but needs can actually be split into two very distinct things, and which is something that I learned from the way that your tools work, by the way. So in the X-Plan world, you have expenses and you have objectives. And in essence, those are exactly the same thing. They work the same. That's the same way that they come into the planning and all of it. But I think making that clear distinction between, what is the critical expenses that I must have to maintain my lifestyle, and then what are the other nice things that I would like to do over and above that, to have that very clear distinction is actually, I think, a very clever way of going about it. So I mean, from an objective point of view, what is the things that we really need to know about goals and objectives and needs of a client to really make sure that we go in the right direction?
For me, Francois, it all comes back to knowing your client. Goals and objectives is an emotive, in my opinion, area. So it's like you said, it's a nice to have, it's a want, it's not a need, in my opinion. So this talks to the qualitative data. It's not exactly, I need 500,000 in 10 years' time when my daughter's going to get married to pay for a wedding, for example. So you need to understand how your client thinks about their goals. You need to understand what they're going to do if the market suddenly changes. They're going to make rash decisions. There's certain things that are going to be obstructed by that. So essentially, knowing your client is key for objectives. Being able to talk to realistic goals, making sure that they're not having that. You can have dreams and aspirations, but making sure that those tie back to reality in some way. And then with that, using different modeling capabilities to be able to cater for the probability of reaching those goals. There are calculators out there, and we spoke about in the first series with regards to the rate of return or the probability of returns. And then if not reaching that probability or not reaching that return, which objectives or goals can they cancel or not use? And again, that comes back to an emotive decision. So yeah, it's a very important area, because it talks to that difficult subject of emotion within a financial plan.
And where does behavior fit into this, Rob? I mean, behavioral habits of the clients and all of that. I mean, that definitely informs sort of, how we have that conversation around goals. So putting those objectives and those needs into the system is really sort of the last thing that we do. So how does behavioral kind of things impact on that?
That is really where I think the appealing to the emotional side of the customer and really understanding what's important to them. So, risk planning for me is probably a fairly easy side to marry the behavioral side of customer, the emotional side of customer, to the factual information that we've gathered, because invariably the client's already drafted a will, and if you just run a test to understand whether that will actually works, you don't really have to prey on the emotions of the customer or the needs or the objectives. It doesn't work. So what are we going to do? Change your will? Is your wife not going to inherit what you want her to, or vice versa? For me, the big things are really understanding the important aspects of a customer's life, and this is where initial first meetings are difficult, because the trust relationship may not be in place. And as we flesh that out over time, we get closer to that customer. We start to understand what drives them, what's important to them, what their future starts to look like, what they want for their children, their children's children. There's a lot of requests. We see a lot of financial planning these days where grandparents want to provide for their grandchildren's education, or to subsidize the grandchildren's education over and above what the parents are doing. How do we as financial planners understand what those key important drivers are, and how do we incorporate them? And then Richard was talking about the different goals and objectives, and that the prioritization here is very key, and the ability to understand that priority and work with that in a financial plan, so that if the retirement position is unaffordable, for example, how do we work on the priorities of the goals and objectives to bring that more in line? And you can't work on priorities if you don't understand what's important to the customer, and you don't know what's driving them and which way they're wanting to turn next. Realizing, someone's got a beach cottage or a farm in the Karoo or a lodge in the bush somewhere. When is the right time to talk to that customer about, is it still viable to keep this going, or should we be looking to realize that and bring it in to subsidize other goals and objectives that you may have? It also brings me back to the first series where we spoke about assumptions and the ability with the correct data to be able to produce range of return or probability charts. I think this is something that becomes very key in terms of assisting customers to understand the probability of them not achieving their goals and objectives. It's when you just model a typical scenario, it's not uncommon to apply range of return calculations or what we call what maybe is more scientific is Monte Carlo simulations to the cash flow. It's not uncommon to see a 40% probability of not achieving the goals. Now, if those goals and objectives are important to the customer, it is the main drivers of what the customer is looking for. Then understanding how you manage that downside and ensure that you limit the downside potential becomes very key to that customer being able to walk away with satisfaction that their goals and objectives are being handled efficiently, are on track. And when we come to next year and we sit down in the review, we get a little bit closer to the truth in terms of realizing those goals and objectives with the client.
Yeah, and that's sort of one thing that I wanted to add there is that, without having these goals and objectives, we don't know whether we're headed in the right direction or how far we're off or how close we are. But also what you want to do is to build up a history of these goals and also see how they've changed and evolved over time. Because you speak to somebody who's in their 30s and they've got small children, and you speak to somebody who's in their 50s and their children are leaving their house, suddenly, things are changing. And also even the way that you saw your retirement maybe back then is now changing, as we go forward. And obviously I think it's interesting to also be able to show that and having that data to be able to follow how things have evolved. I think it's going to tell a very compelling story that one could use in your practice in general, and make people aware of, and that you can consider when you are planning for different kinds of people who are at different stages of their lives. So I think the one thing that we don't use this financial planning data enough for, and I think maybe the challenge for that is that we don't get a global view of all of this data across all of our clients to sort of start picking up trends and seeing what we can do with this and just telling a story about, the way that financial planning is evolving, as people move through the different life stages. We are taught all of this stuff, but, I think what will be great is if I can say, well, I want to see all the planning that I've done for all of my clients and sort of see if you can start picking up trends and things like that. So I don't know if that's ever going to be in the pipeline or if that's ever, is that something that guys like you are thinking about?
Well, I think yes and no. I think ultimately we're looking at the feedback from our customers to define where we go. But one of the benefits of being in a company like Iress is that we are a global company with major distributions across the globe, i.e. Australia, the UK, South Africa, Canada, and Singapore, New Zealand. So we're able to leverage off what global trends are. Where do we see things happen? What's going on in the UK right now? Where is the market going? Goals-based financial planning, whole separate series of discussion, if you will, but is quite topical out there in the marketplace. And I personally have had conversations with a couple of different practices around what does that mean. And I've got my views about what goals-based financial planning is, and I have yet to find a consistent definition. Everyone's got their opinions of what it is or what it isn't. So ultimately, our responsibility as a provider of software to the market is to not only try and direct the market in terms of global trends and and ideas, but also to listen to our customers and understand what's important to them and their customer's customer. What do they need and what's missing and what have you. To go back a couple of years, 3 or 4 years, robo advice was super topical. Everyone was out there bleating robo. I even did a session at the FBR convention a couple of years back on it. But it's quiet. We're not seeing big noise in the marketplace. It's everyone's sort of talking about it, but it's funny enough. It's less about the ability to do a calculation, i.e., the client doing a calculation by themselves. It's actually more about making sure that the client has got access to all the data that drives their financial planning and is important to them. The end calculation, which is where the robo argument was going at one point, is actually very small. I'm not saying the market's small. I'm just saying that the emphasis and the focus is pretty small.
Yeah, and also, I want to get to the next point about collecting the data and making sure that it stays relevant and up to date. But I'm just thinking as you're talking, often something starts off like that. So there's this big thing, and it becomes something completely different that nobody foresaw. But if it wasn't for that start, we never would have gotten to that point. So it's interesting. I also had this discussion with Barry back in episode 13. Wow, that's a long time ago, where we were speaking about specifically robo advice and the impact of that, and that it's really not. It never turned out to be what we thought it was going to be. But I think it's leading to other stuff that is really amazing, and it makes us think. It's like you try this and then you see it doesn't work, and then but what if I do this, and eventually it becomes this fantastic thing. So that's one of the things that I'm just foreseeing. Like if we sit, I don't think we realize with how much data we sit. Yes, you can see assets, liabilities, blah blah blah, but the actual cash flows that you generated for all of your clients, for all of your retirement planning clients, or for all of your risk planning clients. There must be interesting things that one would be able to pick up from that in your practice, and actually use that in storytelling and marketing and just guiding and having conversations and all that kind of stuff. So let's talk quickly about, how do we capture data? How do we get it into the system? And how do we ensure it remains fairly accurate?
So we've certainly spoken at length around Astute. And Astute is most definitely looking to expand their value add services to the market. So typically policies, retirement funds, as they always have been, moving into employee benefits. There's talk of them also looking at teaming up or collaborating with another business model to look at the valuation of primary of property and be able to pull that in. I'm not sure how that particular aspect of it would fly, but it's quite an interesting one in terms of discussion. And I think we did mention the fact that Astute is also moving into the investment space fairly aggressively now, with a view of bringing list business and related into an Astute feed. And providing that through to what they term FNA providers, such as Iress at Work, and so on. And what that means is that your investment data will be coming in. It will be transactional based. It means that you'll be able to report on your client's position in terms of asset value as of close of business last night, every day. Now that's pretty impressive. We, as Iress, we do that already. We have a different relationship in terms of investment data to what Astute is entering the market to do, and we've been doing it for about 8 or 9 years now. But really, what it means is that we're able to provide pretty much any LISP product from certainly the top 8, 9, 10 providers out there, and be able to provide those values as of close of business last night. Because it's transactional based information, it means that things like capital gains tax and income tax and performance internal rate of return, or more commonly now time-weighted rate of return, are very straightforward calculations when you have the data. Without the data, you can't get any of those things right. And we see some of our customers now actually starting to produce, I think it's the IT 3As, Bs and Cs returns to SARS in terms of what the transactional data was for the last 12 months, what the gains have been or the losses, and being able to report on CGT and income tax directly off the data that we provide. So again, in terms of coming back to the foundation is most definitely data. And then a final one that is actually still, I won't say it's in its infancy. We definitely have clients that are doing it. But how do we get customers to update their own information that is susceptible to change? Because whilst we've got a pretty good understanding and handle on things like astute data downloads, investment data downloads that I've described, whether it be from us directly or from astute, things like property, incomes, expenses, liabilities, how do we get those things updated? Do we email the client a data capture form? Do I go around and sit with the client? I had a conversation with one of Sanlam's top advisors a couple of weeks back, and he was very frustrated with the process that they've got, because he went around to see some doctor, and when he got to see the doctor said, "Yeah, but you've missed half the stuff." Because his paraplanner had called the doctor while the doctor was driving, and the doctor had recited some numbers and then missed half of it. And the plan that the advisor actually wanted to put on the table was now invalid because there was a whole bunch of data that was missed. So how do we get clients to actually update this? I mean, Receiver of Revenue has got this process fairly right for a long time. When you log into e-filing and that, tell us what's changed. Even when they used to send you your form, it was pre-populated and you had to just come back and tell them what had changed. So how do we get clients to log into a portal where 2 weeks before review, data's due, they can update information that is susceptible to change? That technology exists. We can give clients portal access. We can ask them to follow a wizard process or what a guided process, a step-by-step process to update their balance sheet, update their incomes and expenses, tell us what's important, what's changed in their life, even attach a copy of a document and post that back to the advisor site and trigger the next step of the review process, whether it be preparing the final review pack or whatever it is. But I think the involvement of the clients in updating information that is susceptible to change takes a great weight off the advisor practice. And it also gets the client thinking along the lines of what's coming up, what's important to me, what do I need to be doing? And so those are our sort of three key areas. Data imports of CSV spreadsheets are possible, but can get messy, and you've got to know what you're doing. So whilst we would do that for a new business setup or something like that, we wouldn't advocate that as an ongoing process to try and import from a CSV file. It's not ideal.
Good stuff. Guys, yeah, so we've come to the end. Thank you very much for this. I think it was a very insightful series, and I look forward to see what we're going to do somewhere in the future, maybe, and some other topics that we can come up with. But also, if there's anything that you as the audience would like us to talk about and to really flesh out, from a technology point of view, or anything else for that matter, from my point of view, let us know. We will definitely have a discussion around that. So, Rob and Richard, from my side, just a big thank you. I think it was a great series, and I look forward to working with you some more into the future. And let's see, what we can do to help build this profession. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. It's like, how do we make things better for the client, for the advisor, and for us?
Absolutely, 100%. Cool, Francois.
Thanks everyone for joining. I hope it was of value.
Good.
Yes, thank you very much. And I will then be back tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow we are at 3 p.m. Talking to Brian Parsley. Looking forward to that. And on that note, thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and I'll see you back tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.